Warning, this video will contain major spoilers for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. It will also feature shots from an incredibly creepy horror franchise. If you're sensitive to horror or you don't want this movie spoiled, please turn back now. I'm going to be 110% honest with you guys. If Scott Cawthon wasn't a devout Christian, I probably wouldn't be making this video. Yes, you heard me right. Scott Cawthon, the creator and developer of the Five Nights at Freddy's horror franchise, author of the books, and writer on the movie, is a devout Christian. And from now on, I'm just going to refer to Five Nights at Freddy's as FNAF. When Scott Cawthon first began his career in video games, he made a lot of small Christian games and animated movies. He also credits God for saving his life during a particularly dark time, and as far as we know, he's still a believer. At least for me, that's what makes his work on FNAF so confusing. I don't see any clear evidence of Mr. Cawthon's faith shining through this franchise, and it disturbs me just how popular it is with children. It is a really creepy and disturbing horror franchise that for some reason is very popular with kids when it shouldn't be. It's dark and it's scary, and it's no doubt harmful to its young audience by desensitizing them to horror and introducing them to mature adult topics like child predation and murder. That's why I don't think that any kids should ever really be playing these games, reading these books, or watching this movie. But knowing that Scott Cawthon is a devout Christian who used to make explicitly Christian indie games intrigues me. Why did he stop putting his faith into his work? Did he stop putting his faith into his work? I watched the first FNAF movie with the most charitable open-mindedness to see if there was anything that I could pull to make this video. I wasn't disappointed, and I have to give Mr. Cawthon at least some credit for not putting anything graphically violent into his work. There are some key biblical themes in this movie that we could learn from, so let's get right into it. Children play a major part in the whole FNAF franchise. I already talked about how disturbing I think it is that this franchise is popular with kids. Again, it really shouldn't be. It's definitely introducing them to disturbing, mature topics that they aren't yet ready for, and it's desensitizing them to horror. To my recollection, the movie didn't have any bad words or graphic scenes. The depictions of violence were minimal, but there's definitely a lot of creepy and disturbing stuff here. And that's why it's so important that we address the topic of children first. To me, it's awful that they make up the franchise's whole fan base. Beyond that, children play an important role in the movie's story and in the games as well. The primary antagonist is a serial killer and child predator named William Afton. This guy was one of the co-founders of a popular pizza arcade place called Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. He used his position in the company to hide his crimes. He would kidnap children, and when he was done with them, murder them and hide his victims' bodies in the animatronic characters at the restaurant. He also dressed in a mascot costume himself. He was the guy in a yellow rabbit suit. At some point in the 1980s, 5 children went missing at the pizzeria, and they shut down the business. The kids were never found because William had stuffed them into the animatronics. Now, in the modern day, even though the business is no longer in operation, William Afton still keeps the building for some reason. He could demolish it and destroy all evidence of his crimes, but instead he chooses to keep the building around for some reason, and he hires a security guard to keep the place protected from vandals and thieves. Here's the problem. The ghosts of the dead children now possess the animatronic characters, and they can freely roam the building. Strangely, they are pretty harmless and they have no intentions to hurt anyone. I guess that kind of makes sense because after all, they are the spirits of innocent children. But when they're under the control and under the negative influence of William Afton, they become violent, dangerous, and they will kill people. Somehow, William has found a way to control and manipulate them. This William Afton guy is maybe one of the most evil men in all of fictional media. It's so disturbing to me because obviously what he's doing here isn't too far off from the heinous crimes that people still commit today. Psalm 127, 3-5 speaks about the blessing that children are to our lives. Children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from Him. Children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. Children are the most special and precious additions to our lives. Jesus valued children so much that He said in Matthew 19:14, "Let the children come to me. Don't stop them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these children." And He was so protective over the children that He said in Matthew 18:6, But if you cause one of these little ones who trusts in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. So biblically speaking, children are the most valuable and precious members of our society. And they are also the most vulnerable and in need of protection. A society that does not value or care for its children is the most sick society. Those societies have always existed, and sadly, we still live in one today. Children absolutely need our continued support and protection because they can't support or protect themselves, and there are always sick and twisted people out there who either want to harm them or who will inevitably harm them through ignorance and negligence. That's why I don't like FNAF. Even though it seems like it's against the harm of children, and the movie certainly advocates for their safety against bad guys, the truth is that their whole fan base are mostly children who are now exposed to things that they shouldn't be. Remember when I said that the ghosts of these dead children now possess the animatronics? This is also really controversial from a biblical perspective. First and foremost, we should talk about spirits and souls. There is some debate over whether or not souls and spirits are two separate and distinct things. Some people think that these are interchangeable terms, and some people think that they're different. In the Bible, the soul is nephesh in Hebrew, which was translated into psyche in Greek. The spirit is ruach in Hebrew and pneuma in Greek. So yes, we do have two separate and distinct words for soul and spirit, and sometimes they're used distinctively in the Bible. But other times they sound interchangeable, and the distinction between the two isn't very clear. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to use soul and spirit interchangeably, only because it isn't really important to my broader message, and it's definitely not important in the context of this story. For all intents and purposes, this is about the ghosts of dead children. All that is important to understand is that William Afton killed children, put their bodies into these animatronics to hide them, and now their souls are possessing these animatronics. A lot of horror franchises feature disembodied souls who wander the earth rather than moving on to a different afterlife realm like heaven or hell. And to be fair, there are plenty of debates amongst Christians about where we go when we die and what it'll really be like. I'm not here to preach one version of heaven or hell because there's a lot of debate about that. Not all Christians agree about heaven or hell. But the one thing that almost all Christians would agree with is that souls don't wander the earth or possess objects. That being said, the idea that souls of the dead might be wandering around is a really ancient idea. I'm not saying that I agree with it, because I don't, but I am going to lay out a biblical case that the concept of ghostly apparitions wandering the earth is an ancient idea. We're going to go all the way back to the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is not a canonical text in most Jewish and Christian churches, and there's good reason for that. But this book is ancient. The oldest parts of 1st Enoch are estimated to have been written about 300 to 200 BC or older. A text this old surely had some kind of impact on Jewish culture. It's quoted directly in the Epistle of Jude in the New Testament, and the events of the Book of Enoch are referenced in Genesis. So yes, this is proof that it definitely had an impact on Jewish culture. I want to be careful with my words here. I am not advocating for the idea that the Book of Enoch should be canonized or that it's authoritative. There are good reasons why it's not. I'm simply building the case to explain why this text was important to the Jewish and Christian cultures surrounding the biblical authors. So we can still learn from it, even if we take it with a grain of salt. The only reason that I'm bringing it up at all is because of this section in 1st Enoch chapter 15. And now, the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, and the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. 1st Enoch 15, verses 8 through 11. Did you catch that? 1st Enoch is saying that the spirits of dead giants are now roaming the earth and causing chaos. There's way too many details to get into right now, but the short summary of the story is that fallen angels descended to earth, mated with human women, created a race of giant offspring. These giants died, and now their spirits are loose on the earth. I know it sounds weird, but this story is actually shortly summarized in Genesis chapter 6 as well. As bizarre as it sounds, smarter men than me could explain this stuff much better. I recommend checking out Timothy Alberino's work or Dr. Michael Heiser's work. Dr. Michael Heiser believed that the spirits of these dead giants are what ancient Christians and Jews thought demons were, because Enoch clearly says that they would roam the earth as evil spirits and cause chaos. I'm not trying to build a case for why the ghosts of dead people are real. I don't believe that they are. I'm trying to build a case for why ancient people have always believed in disembodied spirits, even evil ones. And even if all of this sounds scandalous to you or you're highly skeptical, there is one verse from the Gospels that we need to understand. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" Matthew 14:26. When Jesus' disciples saw him walking on water, they initially assumed that they were seeing a ghost. It doesn't make any sense why they would assume that if they didn't believe in ghosts. There clearly was a cultural idea of ghostly apparitions for them to think that Jesus was one. So are the ghosts of dead children biblical? Definitely not. I think the correct biblical idea is that any spirits that we might encounter are evil or demonic spirits, and I've already laid out that case. But I'm just trying to wrestle with why Scott Cawthon, as a Christian, would write a story where dead spirits possess animatronics. I believe it's because it speaks well to his broader message about the abuse of children. In Genesis, Cain murders his brother Abel. But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Genesis 4:10. This is the language of justice. Almost everyone has an innate understanding and knowledge of right and wrong. This is because the Bible says God writes the law on our hearts. They demonstrate that God's law is written in their hearts, for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them they are doing right. Romans 2:15. All people understand right and wrong whether they know the Bible or not. Paul is clearly saying that people can be moral and know right and wrong apart from the Bible because God programmed us that way. Since we all have an understanding of right and wrong, we also all have some sense of justice. There should be consequences for bad actions, and there should be rewards for good actions. That's why when I told you that William Afton killed children and he got away with it by hiding their bodies, you probably cringed or felt something in your heart, even though it's a fictional story. Scott Cawthon knows that this is a powerful storytelling technique because it appeals to our innate sense for justice. That's why William Afton ultimately suffers in the end for his crimes. My understanding is that in the game series, William Afton gets stuck in some kind of never-ending eternal hell. The movie ends a little differently because this is just the first installment. Shaggy from Scooby-Doo does another scream and he reveals that he was the bad guy all along, but then he gets trapped in an animatronic himself. The internal mechanisms crush his body and kill him. I think that this guy will almost certainly return in a future installment because he definitely knows how to possess animatronics. But as long as Scott Cawthon is behind the screenwriting, you know that he'll face eternal consequences for his crimes. I have so much more that I could talk about with this movie. I didn't even get into the main plot at all, which centers around Mike Schmidt and his job as a security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike has a really interesting story, and there are so many more themes that we should discuss when it comes to his sleep, dreams, living in the past, and dealing with his guilt and trauma. I felt like this video was getting too long, so we'll cut it there. But please, let me know in the comments, do you prefer shorter videos or longer videos? 10 to 15 minute long videos or 20 to 30 minute long videos? If this video does well, maybe we'll do a part 2. There is a second movie coming out soon and there's plenty of games to cover as well. But in the meantime, if you like this video, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments what movie we should break down next. And if you'd like to support more deep dives into the hidden Christian truth in pop culture, consider supporting us on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. Thanks for watching.